I am here with Justin Fier from Darktrace. Justin, welcome.
Thank you.
Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes, I'm the VP of Tactical Risk and Response, and that basically means I wear a lot of different hats with the company. One is doing things like this, evangelizing and talking to the community about thought leadership type, topics in our industry, but also helping our clients just think a little bit differently about security, because that is what put Darktrace on the map, is doing things very different than what our industry typically is doing.
Great. So today we're going to talk about cybersecurity as an issue for the 2022 midterms, which are coming up in about 5 or 6 months. So at a high level, what do you think we should be thinking about for security for the midterms?
Yeah, I think the obvious one is disinformation. We all know that we allegedly fell victim to a major disinformation campaign, in the last major election. And whether it's domestic or foreign-born, I think misinformation is probably here to stay for the foreseeable future on numerous elections moving forward. So sorry to go for the low-hanging fruit, but that would be my first, instance.
Okay, so it's a really good place to start, because, and I've had various dialogues about this myself, which is an issue like misinformation or disinformation, is that a security issue, or is that just an issue of like media policy or something? Do you see it as a cybersecurity issue?
I think it's a combination of both. I think some of that misinformation can be utilized for social engineering type attacks, to actually further damage, potentially the elections or various parts of it. We saw, in the 2016 election that the DNC was compromised and other major political wings were actually compromised as a result of it. So, disinformation is one thing. I think we'll probably still see some of that, actual compromising of organizations as well.
Yeah, because in 2016, and during that election cycle, I asked a question. I said, if a malicious actor sets up a fake Facebook account to spread an untrue story, is that a form of hacking? And different people had different opinions about that. Some people said, no, that's just, somebody being clever. And other people said, no, it's hacking in the sense that you're abusing the system and making it do something it wasn't meant to do. The reason I asked was, well, what can you do about it? What can be done to mitigate that threat?
I am on the latter. I 110% do believe that is a form of hacking or cybersecurity, however you want to refer to it. That is social engineering at its heart. It's just not the common story you hear of someone picking up the phone and tricking the help desk guy into giving up information. But that's why there is that gray area that I do think this information was kind of born out of the cybersecurity space, because that is a great example that you bring up. As far as how do we combat that, not to point fingers at any one in particular, but I hope and I think that, social media platforms realized in that 2016 election just how powerful they are and how integral they are, in all parts of our society, including elections. And I actually do think of them now as posing a sense of social security threat, national security threat. What do we do about that? Maybe policy, maybe some sort of litigation. I'm not sure, because there's always that argument of free speech, which, of course, we're hearing a lot about right now with what's going on at the Supreme Court.
Very good. So Lauren has joined us.
Hello. Sorry I'm late. My call ran over.
Oh, okay. So we're discussing cybersecurity issues in the 2022 midterm elections.
Yes.
So, so let me ask you both this question, okay? Which is, if we talk about disinformation, so Justin's concerned about disinformation. Like to get Lauren's take on disinformation risk, but what other risks do you see? Because these are some of the things I would be concerned about. Disruption of election systems, disruptive activities like ransomware, whatever, that could cause problems during the election, maybe not to the election system, but like cause all the traffic lights in the city to go out, or something that would slow down voting. what else could go on? There's doxing and breaching of data, like you talked about the DNC hack. What are do you feel like those are things we should be worried about in 2022? Or what else?
I can go into all three of those. I have opinions on all of those.
Okay, well, that's what we're here for.
Yeah, so the first one, at the actual electoral system, I think that is a common misconception. Can we hack the election system? It's decentralized on purpose, for that very reason. And for the most part, it should not be connected to the internet. I say should because, of course, we'll always find those one-off cases where it might have actually been. The voter village has been around at DEF CON for the last decade, if not more. And it's been proven time and time again that someone could walk up and plug a USB drive into one of these voting machines and likely compromise it. That's not a secret. Everybody knows about that. The problem is when you look at that at scale, if an adversary wanted to do that, they would have to deploy thousands and thousands of agents or assets that they've already flipped here in the country, or even managed to get into the country and then deploy them at all these places that are, oh, by the way, heavily monitored already, and get them to plug these USB drives in. It sounds cool, but that's more Hollywood. There's really no payoff there. That's why I come back to disinformation. When you're looking for, the best return on investment, changing people's minds is a whole lot cheaper. As you already alluded, I can pay a couple $100,000 and get social media ad space. And it's much cleaner and safer for me as an adversary to actually do it that way, as opposed to sending 30,000 spies, into the country and asking them to all plug in a USB drive. Now, the one caveat I will say to that is we've all been introduced to this little thing called software supply chains in the last 12 months. And so that will be something that I'm sure, I don't know specifically, but I have to imagine the various local governments are considering when looking at the different products they're using and just the infrastructure as a whole that supports the electoral system.
Do you worry at all about cyber-physical attacks? This is something that's come up in various discussions I've had where, disinformation could be used to prompt a physical event like a riot or something. Do you see that as an issue for 2022?
Yeah, absolutely. And while there's all these discussions about, the new ownership of Twitter and what that might mean, I come back to that original point that social media really has more power than a lot of folks, I think, know or realize. And that's a great example. If an account of someone that had hundreds of thousands of followers had been compromised and someone put something out inciting something, you have to imagine there are some folks that probably would carry out that type of action. And I think we've already seen that happen in various other parts of the world. So it's not too crazy of a thought to think that it could happen here. Going to your other point of, cybersecurity, from a national infrastructure standpoint, while it's not necessarily affiliated directly with the elections, it worries me. It keeps me up at night. If you just look at all the alerts coming out from CISA, they've been prepping for it for the last 6 to 9 months, getting us ready for the fact that there is likely intelligence that shows that folks are trying to get at our national critical infrastructure. I am sad to say, but I feel like in my lifetime, I will probably see some sort of major cyber attack that results in some real world outcome, whether it's the lights going out or the water to stop flowing. We've already lived through, supply chain shortages as the result of the pandemic. And I wonder what our society would do if the power was out for more than a few days, or even just something as simple as cell service. We all are so reliable on these little devices. Imagine just how frustrated you get when your service goes down for a few minutes. Right.
Yeah. I mean, that's something that I worry about, which is sort of digital blackout, where you're shut off. And I think that in the very brief experiences I've had of it in the last year or two, it's disorienting, if you can't, somehow, and it's funny, I'm old enough to remember, well, you just go buy a newspaper, you'll find out everything you need, but that's not so relevant anymore. Well, what do you think should be done about this? What actions do you think people should take, and who should do them, and that sort of thing?
In regards to national critical infrastructure?
Yeah, that. And so we talked about disinformation a little bit. You're not so concerned about interfering with electoral infrastructure.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Yeah, not at all. As I mentioned before, a lot of attackers tend to rinse and repeat. It's been proven that the social media disinformation campaign works. And it would be foolish for us to think that that's not going to be utilized against us, not just in the midterms, but the next major election, and then probably the next 5 after that.
Right.
It's a problem that's reaching across many different industries. And so, as I said before, most attackers usually just look at the results of historical attacks, tweak them slightly, and then go ahead and just copy them. That's the thing that worries me. What did they learn as a result of those 2016 elections and then others? That should be the thing that frightens all of us, because they're not just going to do the same exact thing. They learned a lot from the result of that, and then the 4 years after that. And I got to wonder what changes have been made to either, further, trick us into believing these things, or just make themselves even more effective.
So the question is mitigation. So one thing, you're saying, so the social media platforms can change their policies, I guess. Can anything else be done? Like, what else would you recommend?
I think a lot of the responsibility falls on those platforms, and they are, owning up to it. They are, putting more resources at trying to combat this type of, problem. But it is a very hard problem to solve, and I think more resources will likely have to be thrown at it. But as I said earlier, I think it's going to be a combination of the owners of these platforms working in conjunction with the federal government to try to find that happy space, all the while not infringing on our freedom of speech. And that's going to be the trickiest thing.
What do you think? Let me just throw something at you. If this is an issue you haven't thought about, you can pass. But one of the things that I'm pretty sure Elon Musk has suggested he'll do with Twitter is to introduce some transparency into the algorithm and publish. And this has come up. I see this in a lot of discussions about like ethical AI and stuff. Publish the algorithm or open source it or whatever, so people can. There's probably only like 20 people in the country who really know how to look at it and see what it means. But
right, exactly.
But at least it's there. Like, do you think that would help exposing the algorithm?
I think in certain industries, yes, exposing the algorithm can certainly help. In other cases, no, you definitely don't want that released. I will flip the script a little bit on you, but I wonder if exposing that also gives the bad folks the ability to find ways to maybe create biases within there, or find ways to still get their content out, in a way that the algorithm might not pick things up. And so there's always a pro con to that. I understand why they are considering that, and I'm fully on board with moral and ethical AI, but we have to also game theory this out and think of, what the bad actors are going to do with this piece of information. Everybody will weaponize things.
It's a very good point, and I think it's something to keep in mind, because when people talk about opening up the algorithm, it might be a good idea if it's like trying to figure out how, drugs are prescribed or something where people might be harmed by an algorithm, versus politics where, like you might just be, giving a disinformation actor a better sense of how to manipulate. My personal opinion is that the platforms could do a better job of filtering out fake accounts. I feel like this is an issue that's very primal, foundational to the whole problem, and doesn't seem to be addressed. And by the way, this doesn't have to do with politics, but like, it seems to me like if you have a platform that has millions of fake users, they're engaging in advertising fraud, right? I mean, if they're selling impressions to fake users, isn't that fraud? But I don't know. Nobody asked me, so.
I think it is very. I totally see where you're coming from, and I do agree, but I also disagree to an extent. I think they're doing the best they can, but I think you have to think of the numbers. How many users are on these actual platforms? In some cases, it's very easy to spot a fake user account. created less than 12 hours ago, has a weird string of digits, But I will say attackers are getting a lot more creative in creating these accounts. They're using artificial intelligence to actually create fake faces that look fully realistic. Deep fakes. I can put video up now of you talking, but it's not you actually talking. And so I do think things like that are making it very complex and very difficult for these platforms to actually spot these accounts. If it's difficult for me to spot, then it's certainly going to be difficult for their own platform to spot. But I go back to that numbers game. If you look back at how many Facebook users there are, how many Twitter users there are, even if only 5% or 10% of them are fake accounts, that's a lot of noise surrounding all of those accounts. And it is difficult to kind of pluck them out, from the true actual accounts.
Okay. Well, this is an interesting discussion. Yeah. So, well, so tell me how Darktrace works in all this. Like, how do you work in this?
Yeah. So specifically, we do, anomaly detection across your entire digital estate. Now, we do detection. That's just one piece, but we also do autonomous response. We found many years ago that we were doing such a good job surfacing all these strange things happening in everything from email to cloud to SaaS to your network traffic, that it was fascinating for the end user, but all of our customers have the same problem each of them else has, is that there's not enough of me to hire. There's not enough cybersecurity professionals to actually go around, and skilled ones to go and actually do this work. And so they said, well, now let's use your same AI or your expertise in AI to actually do autonomous response. So we do detection. We do very surgical and tactical response. Our goal when inflicting a response within an environment is to minimize impact to the business. So I don't want to wipe out an entire subnet. I don't want to kick you off your computer for half the day and tell you to go home. I want to take an action to the point where you don't even realize I've taken an action, but we've stopped an in-progress attack within your network. We've also done things like creating an AI version of me. So Darktrace studied myself and my 150 colleagues around the globe, and we found the pattern of a human question and answer thought process. So when I'm provided with an input, various model breaches within our tool set, I tend to ask certain questions, and we found that my colleagues also ask those similar questions. So we built what we call the Cyber AI Analyst, and that is an AI version of a human analyst looking through your entire ecosystem, bubbling up those interesting things, and then writing a full report, asking the questions your humans should be asking, and then going out and finding the answers. And, and so that is kind of what we do in a nutshell, finding the strange things that are happening within your entire environment.
Interesting. Well, I wonder if that could be, maybe not today, but at some point applied to detecting disinformation in the public sphere.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are some great open source products already out there and some great reading. Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, like during the 2020 election, there were a couple of Facebook pages that were influential. And one of them was, this was just eyeballing it. There were comments being regenerated at such a rapid rate that I thought, this can't be real. Like my own personal anomaly detector went off. Like, I know there's a lot of people, but there can't be like 500 comments every 10 seconds. Like there's something was, in my opinion, automated generation.
That should be the easy ones that they can spot. Because if you think it looks weird because it's happening so quick, but again, that's what I said. It could also be that it was true. It was such a widely viewed post that so many people were actually clicking. Yeah. My inkling is where you are at. I suspect there was probably some sort of bot level activity on the back end of that.
But also, I think a related issue, and I'd love to get your take on this, is that policymakers may not really understand the scale of this. Like I talked about this in my book, which is that during 2016 cycle, there was a fake video. It wasn't a deep fake, but it was kind of manipulated video of Nancy Pelosi. It made her look like she was drunk, right?
Yep.
So that video got viewed 4 million times. And what I think people don't realize is that's more people than who watch CNN every day.
Right.
Right.
And, so like, once it's out, it's out. 4 million viewers have already seen it. You can't erase their minds. And some of them will never even see the report that it was fake.
Right. See, the impact, if you're talking about policy, like people may not understand that, like, okay, one video that's had more eyeballs than CNN for the day. And so it has a high impact. So I feel like policymakers are a little behind sometimes in figuring this stuff out.
I'll throw another curveball at you.
Yeah.
What about the policymakers that participate in this activity?
Right.
I'm not a lawyer, obviously, but I have to wonder, why can a sitting congressperson be allowed to put out potential propaganda? Whether they were witting or unwitting, that is beyond me. And then going back to the elections, I've at least noticed in the last two major elections that, those videos that say, I so-and-so, endorse this video. Right. They're getting more vicious by the day,
right?
Almost to the point of slander. And I got to wonder when the electoral board is going to kick in and say, okay, it's not a gloves off, situation here. You can't just put out, a commercial with blatant lies. That is in and of itself illegal.
Right.
And I'm wondering when we're going to get to that point.
Well, it's a good question. And I think I'll give you a slightly different thought on that, which is that there's usually been a political price to pay for bad behavior. This, I think, is the change that we've seen in the last 5 to 10 years.
You get rewarded these days.
Right. Like there was usually some self-policing of behavior because it was like, well, this will turn people off and they won't vote for me. But that's turned around. And I don't want to comment on anybody specifically, but there's been a change in the rules there, and whether it's legal or not is not the issue there. It's like, what's going to cost me the election, and you could argue this has been going on for a very long time. The sort of decline in public opinion of standards of what's offensive to people.
And you made a great point earlier. Going back to the kind of fake video that was out there. A lot of these policymakers aren't even aware something is fake before they retweet it out to their hundreds of thousands of constituents out there. And that's why I go back to does it really matter if you're witting or unwitting when you participate in this type of activity? And that is the power of that platform.
Well, great, Justin. It was great to talk to you about this. We should wrap up now, but I'm sure we'll have you on again to talk about other issues and learn more about Darktrace and anomaly detection and the like. Okay.
Great. Thank you so much.
Very good. Talk to you later.
Take care. Bye.